The psychology of the vacuum. How to use silence to dominate any conversation. There's something nobody ever taught you about power. Not in school, not in any self-help book, not even in the most expensive leadership courses. The most powerful person in any room is rarely the one talking. Let that sink in. You've probably spent years trying to be more articulate, more persuasive, more convincing. You rehearsed arguments, you sharpened your vocabulary, you learned to communicate better, and yet there you are, in a meeting, a negotiation, a difficult conversation, and something subtle is happening that you can't quite name. Someone else is controlling the room, without raising their voice, without a perfect speech, without even saying that much. And you walk away feeling like you lost something, but you don't know what. What you lost was the frame. Today, I want to show you something that will permanently change the way you move through conversations, through relationships, through power dynamics. It's called the psychology of the vacuum, and once you understand how it works, and you can never unsee it. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus was a mid-level manager who always prepared extensively for every meeting. He had his data, his arguments, his counterpoints. He was the most prepared person in the room almost always, and almost always he walked out having conceded more than he intended. One day he noticed something about his VP, a man of very few words. In meetings, this VP would ask a question, a simple question, and then stop. Just stop. He would look at whoever was speaking with total calm and wait. And what happened next was remarkable. People would start talking and filling the space. And they would reveal their doubts, their insecurities, their real intentions. They would over-explain, backtrack, soften their positions. The VP hadn't said anything new. He had simply refused to fill the silence. Marcus tried to understand why that worked so well, and what he discovered changed everything for him. Here's what nobody tells you about silence. It's not the absence of communication. It's the most sophisticated form of communication that exists. When you go quiet, deliberately, strategically, something happens inside the other person's brain. Their nervous system registers an open loop. Humans are wired to close open loops. It's survival instinct. Ambiguity is threatening. Uncertainty feels dangerous. Your brain was built to fill gaps, because in the ancient world, a gap in information could mean a predator, a threat, a hidden danger. So when you create a vacuum in conversation, a deliberate, intentional silence, the other person's nervous system activates, and they fill it. They fill it with words, with explanations, with justifications, with information they never planned to share. Silence is a vacuum, and nature, as they say, abhors a vacuum. The one who stays quiet becomes the one who knows more, and the one who knows more holds the power. But let's go deeper, because this isn't just about gathering information. There's something far more profound happening when silence is used with precision. It changes who you are perceived to be. Think about it. When you react instantly, when you rush to respond, to defend, to explain, what signal does that send? It signals urgency, anxiety, need for approval. It says, your words affect me enough that I must respond immediately. And the moment someone knows their words affect you, they have leverage over you, whether they use it consciously or not. Now think about what happens when you don't react, when you pause, when you absorb, when you take your time as if you have all the time in the world. It signals something completely different. It says, I process on my own timeline. I don't owe you an immediate response. Your provocation, your pressure, doesn't reach me. In the language of psychology, we call this frame control. The frame is the invisible structure that defines how a conversation is being interpreted. Who has status? Who is seeking approval from whom? When you break eye contact, rush to respond, fill every silence, you're accepting their frame. You're operating within the psychological territory they set. When you hold silence, you create a new frame, your own. There's a concept in negotiation science, studied extensively at Harvard's program on negotiation, that skilled negotiators consistently leverage: the strategic pause. The research shows something counterintuitive. The negotiator who speaks less tends to walk away with better outcomes, not because they have better arguments, but because silence after a proposal creates what negotiators call the vacuum effect. You make a proposal, You stop. You wait. The other side, uncomfortable with the open loop, begins to fill the silence. They start revealing their flexibility, their fear, their real bottom line. The one who fills the silence first has almost always weakened their position. Now think about where else this operates in a job interview. You answer a question with confidence and then you stop. No nervous padding, no, I hope that makes sense, no trailing off. You land your sentence and go quiet. What happens? The interviewer fills the space. They nod. They follow up. They show their hand. In a conflict, someone accuses you of something, unfairly or fairly. The instinct is to defend immediately, but the person who pauses, who absorbs, who doesn't rush, they reset the emotional temperature. They are perceived as measured, as grounded, as someone who cannot be destabilized. In a leadership context, the leader who speaks last, who holds space before responding, who doesn't fill every moment with their own voice, this is the leader people lean toward because they feel heard, not talked at. Silence is the architecture of perception. Now I want to name something uncomfortable. Most people are afraid of silence, not because silence is dangerous, but because of what silence forces them to sit with. When the noise stops, the external noise, the chatter, the constant filling, what's left? Yourself, your own thoughts, your own uncertainty, your own presence, and for many people that's terrifying. So they fill it, they overtalk, they over-explain. They make noise to avoid being with themselves. And here's the paradox. The more uncomfortable you are with silence, the more power you give away in every conversation. Because discomfort with silence is visible, it's readable. It's a signal your nervous system is sending out. I need this gap to close. I need resolution. I need the other person's approval. And anyone who can read that signal, consciously or not, knows they have you. Think about the last time someone made you feel truly seen in a conversation. I'd bet it wasn't because they said something brilliant. I'd bet it was because they listened, really listened. They were quiet, enough that their attention felt like a presence. Silence is intimacy. It's authority. It's safety. It's power. But you can only use it if you're not afraid of it. Let's talk about the fear underneath the fear, because this isn't just about communication technique. It goes deeper. When most people can't stay quiet, and when they rush to fill every gap, there's a specific fear driving it. The fear of being misread. If I don't explain, they'll think I'm wrong. If I don't respond immediately, they'll think I'm weak. If I go quiet, they'll think I have nothing to say. Sound familiar? Here's what that fear actually reveals. A belief that your value has to be performed, constantly, out loud, in real time, that you're not enough unless you're proving yourself. And that belief, that core belief, is the real prison, because the moment you internalize that your value is intrinsic, not dependent on others' reactions, not needing constant external confirmation, silence becomes effortless. You don't need to fill every space. You don't need to be constantly understood. You don't need to immediately correct every misperception. You can simply be. And that groundedness is felt by others at a level that bypasses words. People don't experience your silence as emptiness. They experience it as depth. This is what ancient Stoic philosophy understood. Marcus Aurelius wrote of the power of not reacting, of choosing your response rather than being triggered into it. The Stoics understood that response is sovereignty, that the gap between stimulus and response is where freedom lives. Silence is that gap made visible. But let's be clear, there are different kinds of silence. There's the silence of fear, the person who goes quiet because they don't know what to say or because they're avoiding confrontation. There's the silence of absence, the person who's disengaged, not listening, not present. And then there's the silence of power, the deliberate, calibrated, grounded silence of someone who is fully present and choosing not to speak. The difference is everything, and people feel it. The silence of power has a quality to it. It's not nervous. It's not passive. It's not empty. It's full of attention, full of awareness, full of the energy of someone who is entirely here, entirely observing, entirely comfortable in their own skin. How do you develop that kind of silence? It starts with the most fundamental practice imaginable, learning to be comfortable with your own company. Sit with yourself, without a phone, without a screen, without anything to fill the space, not as punishment, as training. Train your nervous system to experience silence as safety, as information, as power, because until silence feels natural to you alone, it will never feel natural in the presence of others. Here is the technique. Precise, surgical, 3 steps. Step 1, the landing. When you make a point, a real point, one that matters, stop. Don't add a qualifier. Don't add, "Does that make sense?" Don't soften the landing. Let your sentence land with full weight. Most people undercut their own power in the 3 seconds after they say something important. They get nervous, they elaborate, they dilute. The discipline is say the thing, stop, let it sit. Step 2, the hold. When someone asks you something that carries weight, a challenge, a negotiation, a high-stakes question, pause before you answer. Not a confused pause, a deliberate one. The pause signals, I don't rush, I consider, I respond, I don't react. Count to 3 in your head, not visibly, not theatrically, just the internal discipline of 3 seconds before you begin. Research shows that a 3-second pause significantly changes how a speaker is perceived, as more confident, more thoughtful, more authoritative. 3 seconds. That's all it takes to shift a power dynamic. Step 3, the vacuum. When you've made your offer, in a negotiation, in a difficult conversation, in any moment where you're asking for something, stop talking completely. Let the silence grow. Feel the urge to fill it. Acknowledge it. And don't act on it. Let the other person break first. Let them speak into the vacuum. Because whoever fills the vacuum first tells you exactly where they stand. I want to close with something that goes beyond technique, because if you apply these things only as tactics, only as manipulation, you'll get some short-term results, and you'll develop a coldness that eventually isolates you. True mastery of silence isn't weaponization, it's presence. The most powerful people I've ever encountered in my life didn't use silence to make others uncomfortable. They used silence because they were genuinely there. They didn't need to perform, they didn't need to fill space. They were so fully present that their quietness communicated everything. And that is the deepest invitation inside this topic. Silence isn't a technique, it's a state of having so much respect for your own inner life that you don't scatter it with unnecessary words, a state of being so rooted in your own identity that you don't need external noise to feel real, a state of presence so complete that the other person feels held by it, not pressured by it. There's a version of you who doesn't explain themselves to people who aren't asking in good faith. There's a version of you who doesn't rush to defend themselves against every misperception. There's a version of you who can walk into any room, any negotiation, any conversation, and be entirely present without performing. That version of you already exists. It's just been buried under a lifetime of noise. Stop filling the space. Start occupying it. Because real power has never been about how much you say. It's always been about how much you don't have to. Subscribe. The next conversation is going to find a different version of you.